Okay, welcome to our Erev Shabbat class, Parashat Shemini, the private conversation between brothers. That is an inconspicuous short excerpt from this parasha that is worthwhile to discuss and engage in. We, of course, are facing the parasha that has the most bittersweet moment in our Torah, when on the day of glory, on the day that Shir HaShirim calls Yom Simchat Lebo, the day of the happiness of the, so to speak, Kiviyachol groom, Hashem, Borei Olam, with his bride, Am Yisrael, is engaged in a never seen before act of Shekhinah, a presence, demonstration of a blatant presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the day we've been waiting for. One of the objectives for which we were taking Adam Messiah and then given Torah to be able to experience such a direct relationship with God, with Hashem. The day that we almost lost because of Chet HaEgel, and then Moshe Rabbeinu heroically retrieved. The day that we built up to in Parashiot, all the instruction and all the construction and all the completion of the Mishkan. The day that followed the inaugurative 7 days of bringing Korbanot and all of the efforts of Moshe Rabbeinu and Aharon and his sons finally arrived, and there was jubilation and ecstasy, Vayar Kol Ha'am Vayaronu, and at the same time, simultaneously, the tragic, very difficult to understand death of the two elder sons of Aharon HaKohen, Nadav Abihu, the great men of holiness and prestige, passed away at that very moment from bringing in Es Zara, offering a foreign fire in Ketoret, an idea and a episode that we're not really going to analyze in this class. Rather, the aftermath of that. In the immediate aftermath, first of all, there is instruction by Moshe Rabbeinu to the cousins of Nadav Abihu, and that is Mishael ve'el Safan, to take out their bodies. Some say just taking out their clothing, because their bodies is already extracted, so to speak. And then a direct prophecy, one of the only in the Torah. First of all, I'm sorry, another instruction from Moshe to Aaron, Elazar, and Itamar, not to mourn, because even though it's a day of sadness, of crying, this is still your obligation and duty to remain in the Mishkan and continue your duties. And then a direct prophecy from Hashem to Aaron, one of the few in the Torah, Yain v'shechar al tesht, for Kohanim never to engage in service, in priestly service, the Mishkan and the Beit HaMikdash, while it's intoxicated, and thus the connection that Hachamim draw between what the death of Nadav Abihu and what they were possibly guilty of. And then we come to our scene. So Moshe tells Aharon and his sons, Elazar and Itamar, and they're called more than once here, Banav Hanotarim, sadly, the remaining sons. He tells them, take the mincha, the flour offering, and what's ever left over from it, and you are to eat it. Why? It's called Kodesh Kadashim. Eat it in a separate place. And also from the Korban Shalamim, you take the portions that are offered to a Kohen, the Hazeh and the Shok, and eat them also. And that brings us to Pasuk Tet Zayin. There's a span here, 5 short Pesukim, in which there is some type of communication, a conversation between Moshe and Aharon. Because of how dramatic and how significant the story which precedes it is, I'm going to express that it's much less focused upon in Parashiot, but fascinating. So let's read through it first. Pasuk Tet Zayin. Ve'tzeira hatat darosh darash Moshe v'hineh soraf. It says the goat offering, the quote hatat korban offering, Moshe darosh darash, a double terminology of investigating or looking into, seeking out, and he saw that it was burnt. Okay, so let us stop for a moment and understand the instructions at the beginning of the parasha in terms of what offering should be brought on this first inaugurative day. There was korbanot that were instructed for the Kohanim privately or to represent themselves, and then also a representation of the nation. Hashem told Aharon, take for you an egel for hatat and an ayil for olah, and Bnei Israel should take a sa'ir azim for hatat and an egel and a kebes for an olah and a shor va'ayil for shilamim. Let's just focus on the hatat for a moment. There was a specific hatat for Aharon to bring, egel ben bakar, that represented the Kohanim. There was a specific one for Bnei Israel, a sa'ir azim. Okay, that's what we know of explicitly from this parasha. Here it says Moshe was looking into what happened to this hatat, and it was soraf, and it was burnt. Okay, we'll get back to what's behind this. Moshe angered. That's chesed, it's anger. On the remaining sons of Aharon, namely Elazar and Itamar. Why the anger? Pasuk Zayin says, why is it burnt? Why didn't you eat it in the holy designated area? This is the level of Korban, Hatat, Olah, Hasham, all Kodesh Kadashim. Instructions normally, the protocol with Korban Hatat is for only limited parts of the animal's body to be offered, the halabim to be offered on the mizbeah, the altar to be burnt, and the rest of it is eaten by the Kohanim, the actual meat. And by the way, it's called Korban Hatat because it's an atonement Korban. And part of the procedure of atonement is following the protocol, which is the Kohanim eating the rest of the meat. So what's going on over here, says Moshe? You caused has v'shalom, some possible detriment to Am Yisrael by burning it. And he goes on to explain, their blood the blood of this korban wasn't brought el hakodesh inside the hechal of the Mishkan pinima. Pinima is inside. It should be eaten. Maybe there was some more to eat. It should be eaten in the holy designated area like I commanded. Based on Hashem, of course. What does he mean in the blood wasn't sprinkled inside? So we do know that there are a few exceptional burnt korbanot hatat. The famous one is Yom Kippur. It is brought, its blood, the se'ira hatat, is brought and sprinkled, usually korban hatat and all other korbanot, the blood is only sprinkled on mizbah hagadol, mizbah nechoshet, the large copper mizbah outside the Mishkan, later outside the Beit HaMikdash. The blood of the Sha'id Hatat Yom Kippur is sprinkled not only inside and on the kaporet, which covers the Kodesh Kodashim, but also uniquely, and the only time we go into Kodesh Kodashim itself, sprinkled on the Aron, between the Kirubim. And later on the second Beit HaMikdash, in the area that it used to be. Then there's also a few other unique Korbanot Hatat that are brought inside, and they're brought sprinkled inside. One's called Par Ha'alem Davar. There's a few times where it's either the Sanhedrin or the Kohen Gadol, or someone makes a mistake in ruling, and the nation accidentally follows them. We won't go into the laws, but there's a few other examples of called Hataot Pinimiyot, inner Hataot. Their blood is sprinkled inside, and those are fully burnt. Those are completely burned. They're treated like a korban olah. Says Moshe Rabbeinu, this is not one of them. So why are you burning it? Wow, good question. By the bit, there's no answer. There's no answer of at least the sons, Elazar and Itamar. But the bit Aharon el Moshe. Instead, Aharon speaks up and he tells Moshe, Today, they offered their korbanot, hatat and olah before God. But tikrena oti ka'ele, and I'm being called in like them. What does that mean? Va'achati hatat hayom, and I gonna eat a hatat today. Hayitad be'anei Adonai. That's she'elah. It's treated by the commentators as not a statement but a question. Would that be good in the eyes of God? And Moshe heard, and he appreciated that. That was good in his eyes. What in the world is going on over here? What was the question? What was the answer? What was the response? Was someone apologetic? Someone changed his mind over here? What's the subject? What's the content? What's going on? Enigmatic conversation over here. So I'd like to take you through just a few theories of what could be the challenge and then what the response was. But what I really want to get to, and I'm not going to ask it yet, is the most intriguing questions, which we'll save to the end. So Rashi brings, based on the Midrash, Torah Kohanim, and the Gemara Masechet Zevachim, and really this is pretty much adopted by the other commentators, that what happened over here. There are three different korbanot hatat that were offered on this day. Well, besides the private one of Aharon and the Kohanim, one was offered by the nation, in the beginning, instructed in the beginning of the Parashat. There's another one that is not mentioned over here. It's mentioned actually in Parashat Naso. We know that in this inaugurative day, according to most opinions, is the first day of Nisan. The eighth day, meaning the eighth day started before Nisan, the eighth Yom HaShemini, the eighth day, which is after the 7 days of inauguration, the first opening day is the first day of Nisan. And we know that also aligns to the Nesi'im, the leaders of all the 12 tribes, brought, we know from Parashat Naso, every single day have to end up being the exact same gift offerings to contribute to the Mishkan on this opening day. And amongst them, Korbanot. And amongst them is Sha'ir Hatat, Korban Hatat. This is the first day. It was the Korban Nachshon ben Aminadav. This is looking at Rashi, that she explains this elaborately. And other commentaries explain Rashi, and Haskuni and others elaborate on Rashi. But that's the second Korban Hatat that was brought that day, the Nasi offering of Nachshon ben Aminadav. And the third was that on every single Rosh Chodesh, Sha'ir Hatat, Ehad lechaper alechem mileba. That's every Rosh Chodesh. There's a Korban Hatat brought. This was Rosh Chodesh Nisan. That's the third one. Okay. So the second one was of Nachshon ben Aminadav. So no, that was Nasi's private offering. So we know that that the first two were supposed to be burnt. The first two were supposed to be burnt. It says in the Pisukim leading up, in fact, in Pasuk Yudbet, it says even the mincha, the flour offering. I'm sorry, that was eaten, but prior to that, the other offerings were said to be burnt on the mizbeach uniquely. In other words, even the hatat. I'll bring you to Pasuk. I'm sorry. Yeah, Pasuk Yud Aleph. This is regarding the hatat. Vet habasar vet haor saraf ba'esh mechus ma'haneh. Okay, so that is the hatat offering of the nation, and that's called it's a korban sha'a. It was a unique, momentary korban and a unique instruction that was burnt. They were supposed to be burnt. Obviously, he's not talking about the korban Nachshon ben Aminadav. He just brought his own thing. So this, says Rashi, based on the Midrash, is talking about the korban Rosh Chodesh. That Sa'id Hatat, which is not mentioned over here, because we know it's separate protocol. Parashat Pinchas tells us about it. For Rosh Chodesh, it was Rosh Chodesh Nisan, they brought a korban Hatat. And that was what Moshe Rabbeinu was addressing. Moshe Rabbeinu says, Darosh Darash. Now, by the way, in most Chumashim, and there's a parentheses by the words darosh, darash, which says that there is a even number of words in the Torah. And so you're not going to have a single middle word. You're going to have two middle words. And these are the two, amazing, right? It's Hashem's book, so it's not too mind-blowing. But the two middle words of the Torah are darosh, darash. The word darosh means to derive, to investigate, to research, to delve into, to learn, to seek. And it'll say in the parentheses, the most printed Humashim, darosh mikah. Learn it from here, learn it from here. We are mid-Torah, right? Darosh, darash. Never stop learning, right? Look into this half, the other half. Okay. Side note. Anyway, Moshe investigated. Why would this korban hatat be burnt? He's very upset. He told them, we rely on this for kapara. You've got to follow protocol. You've got to eat it. He got a great point. He says, this is not one of the inner hataot. There's not one that required burns. Blood was sprinkled inside. It wouldn't require full consumption fire, as exceptional korbanot hatat were. So what's going on here, boys? Now, why didn't he address Aharon? Now, some commentators say, is that a respect? His colleague, his brother? Okay. But this certainly seems to be a good contention. And what was the response to that? The response of Aharon is, again, it's very vague. They brought their hatat and olah before God, but and I am being summoned like them. What does all that mean? So the Midrash points out, well, we know that these, unfortunately, the father and the two brothers of Nadav and Abihu were onenim, right? They haven't even, the deceased hasn't even been buried yet. They're in onen. And onen can bring korbanot when he's not in a regular situation. Right? He can't serve this Kohen in the Beit HaMikdash. But the Kohen Gadol is certainly an exception. And he's pointing out to Moshe Rabbeinu, hold on a second, Moshe Rabbeinu. This is an exceptional situation over here. The korban you're talking about is a korban of dorot. You're not talking about the one-time korban hatat of the nation on this day of inauguration. You're talking about the korban hatat of every Rosh Chodesh forever, as long as we'll have a Beit HaMikdash. So if you say that there is an exception, that these boys, while they were in a status of onen prior to mourning, they, would burn as directed by you, uniquely the korban hatat, right? But who said that they should do the same in the hatat of Rosh Chodesh, which is a korban hatat lidorot? That I don't think, and he said this in a question form, would I do that? I'm a guy that I can serve. I can serve as an onen, right? Should I be burning this korban hatat? This is a hatat that is a generational. This is a constant korban hatat. Rosh Chodesh. Should this be burned? Are you sure God would be okay with that? As if he's almost, it's a rebuttal to challenge Moshe Rabbeinu back. That's what it sounds like, based on the way the Midrash and Rashi is presenting it. And guess what? Vayishma Moshe. Come to think of it, Aharon, you got a good point. You're right. It shouldn't be burnt. What was I thinking? This is the way it's being presented to us. And she points out, how humble he was by acknowledging that. That is an approach to what the response. It was a very technical response. And we have here a discussion between Aharon and Moshe. Seems to be that Aharon won out. There are several different approaches. The Rashbam says that the response of Aharon to Moshe was, why are you getting angry at my boys? This day, this great day of inauguration, became an unfortunate day of tragedy. And And do we expect such a thing to happen? You want to tell them now to eat this korban hatat on this day that's turned into tragedy? They shouldn't be this onanim. They shouldn't be eating. It's not nice for them. He's not taking a technical perspective, the Rashbam, on the response of Aharon. It's not a specific halachic in terms of korbanot, where Aharon responded to Moshe, hey, an onen shouldn't be eating korban hatat if it's a generational korban hatat. No, he's saying it's just not appropriate for a moment of suffering for us to be expected to eat this korban hatat. Banel starts off with a very similar spirit of commentary as the Rashbam, and he says that maybe that was the mistake. They were in such a period of distress because of the tragic sudden death of their brothers, and they mistakenly took this to be something that should be burnt, like the pot was burnt in the previous korban hatat, and they made a mistake. And then Banel says, wait, but then there's a justification of Aharon. And the justification seems to have two reasons. One is that, leave my boys alone, Moshe, Uncle Moshe. First of all, they got very caught up in this day of celebration. It's a day of great magnitude. And if they made a little mistake, leave them alone. And also leave them alone because, look, their brother just died and their mind is not focused. And then, says the Abad Banel, possibly Aharon spun those reasons around and made them reasons why he's right, they're right, and Moshe is wrong. Because after all, he said, this is the day of Hanukkah Mizbeach, of inauguration. So then it's very appropriate. Would not be appropriate then to eat from the korban hatat. It should be only given to God. And number two, on a day of such mourning, it shouldn't be eaten. It should be completely consumed. So he spun around what would be excuses to be a challenge to Moshe Rabbeinu. That's the Abad Banel's approach. So we have different approaches to what the question and answer was. In fact, the Emet Davar, I'll give you one more as a fascinating approach. And he says, you know what? It was clear at that moment to Aharon that Nadav and Abihu died not because of their act bringing an Esh Zarah, foreign fire at this moment. It was all a part of the aftermath of Het HaEgel. And really, everyone should have died. The fact that my other two sons was spared is a miracle. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu was showing at this moment, by the fact that he didn't give them a chance, eating would have been the full kapara if he let them eat. And Nadav and Abihu would have never died. But I need to finish off business from Het HaEgel, and they need to die. Sounds unjust, difficult. It's God. God has a calculation, of course. And that's why he didn't give them, that's why he didn't give them a chance to finish off their protocol and eat the korban. Because they were supposed to die. And that would have been a full kapara. I see. So then you see how Yitad B'Einei Hashem. Hashem never wanted it to happen. Hashem never wanted it to be eaten. That's what he told Moshe Rabbeinu. Interesting, fascinating. So there were different theories of what the response of Aharon was to the challenge of Moshe. In all of them, it seems like the interpretation here that Moshe acquiesced. Moshe Rabbeinu agreed. He acknowledged. Okay. But then my question is as follows. If all that's what happened here was a challenge, a response, and an acquiescing from Moshe Rabbeinu, so it cancels each other out. What in the world is this conversation doing here in the Torah? It even sounds at the end to be somewhat degrading, marginalizing Moshe Rabbeinu. What is this doing here in the Torah? This technical conversation between two brothers. I want to focus on a few quick points. First of all, the anger of Moshe Rabbeinu, and then the fact that they were actually conversing here, and the Torah had to record it, and then the response of Moshe at the end. It's interesting that going back to the Emet Davar, he says, you know why Moshe Rabbeinu chasap? They made a mistake. Why is he so angry? Calm down, Moshe. They made a mistake. Why is he so angry? The Aymek Davar says, you know why the word notarim, the leftover brothers, is spelled without a yod? It's haser in the Torah. If you look at it, he says, because you know what? How many more people do we need to die? Nadav and Abihu just died, a fatal error that they made in the service. Do we need these boys to die as well? He was really worried about them. He was afraid for their lives. And that's why he was so upset. This is irresponsible. One little alteration here and there could be life or death. That's thus the anger of Moshe Rabbeinu. But I want to go back to these words, darosh, darash. And perhaps this is one of the reasons that Moshe, why the Torah decided to bring this episode. Isn't it fascinating here that this is a tragic period of time, and yet what's happening is a halachic conversation? Essentially, this is almost like a hevrutah in the Bet Midrash. Moshe and Aharon across the table, going at it. Logic, sevarot, responses, rebuttals, challenges. That's what's going on over here. They're engaged in Torah Sheba'al Peh. Isn't that seemingly inappropriate at such a tragic time? And the answer is absolutely not. Absolutely not. Torah is for all times and all places, and has relevance and something to say about every single situation in life. The Torah wanted to highlight a Hevrutah in the most desperate time. Amazing. And Moshe Rabbeinu, it doesn't say that he challenged Aaron or his sons. It says darosh, darash. And the Or HaChaim points out that that means that he was misupak, that he wasn't sure. Because otherwise, it would have just said, Moshe told them, hey, eat it. Don't burn it. Instead, what does this mean, darosh, darash? He looked into it. Even the great Moshe Rabbeinu never jumped, was never impulsively judging what the halakha should be like. Allah, the first dictate in all of Pirkei Avot, Hevei mutunim badin. You're going to make a decision, especially in any Torah matter. It should be deliberate. It should be with investigation. It should be looking into things. We just had a description about Mashiach in chapter 12 of Yeshaya, the last day of Pesach. Lo l'mar'eh einav yishpot. Never jump to conclusions. Be deliberate. Look. Let it settle. Be patient. Research. Think. Derive. And of course, that's the way we learn Torah, and that's the way we reach conclusions in halakha. So the Torah here is at the same time highlighting the fact that learning Torah is for all times. It's nice hevrutah between brothers, but at the same time, the approach in such learning. Darosh darash, Moshe Rabbeinu, looking into it thoroughly and not being so sure of himself, being in safek, allowing himself to be in doubt. It's okay. And then, of course, in the end of it all, the greatest rabbi, Hakam, and prophet of all time was not afraid to acknowledge, to agree, to give in so humbly, and vayitav be'anav, to be happy about it in the end. To let his brothers, so to speak, show him up, to be corrected in this great moment. Moshe was fine with it. And that is, of course, the essence of a great learner. To be humble, to know that the objective is not us being right and demonstrating our knowledge, but trying to bring out and highlight the greatness of the Torah Kedoshah. That is an excerpt, almost like in a bubble, out of context, in a moment of joy and tragedy and drama. Just a small excerpt of what learning Torah should look like. Edvahev B'sufa says the famous Gemara, Masechet Kedushin, that there should be always at the end, hava, at the end of an argument. Go at it and argue, fight each other, getting to the truth. Darosh darash. But at the end, it should be love. It should be l'shem shamayim. It should never be about us. It should be about getting to the truth of Torah Kedoshah. And this amazing, unique, inconspicuous little excerpt in our parasha just is outstanding in order to show us these great concepts about learning Torah. Baruch Adonai L'olam. Amen v'amen. Shabbat shalom.